BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello and welcome to the Farming Today podcast with me, Charlotte Smith. On this episode, some good news on rural crime, but the closure of a Scottish abattoir raises concerns.
It's purely down to supply and demand, and bearing in mind that the Scottish abattoir sector is running with 74% capacity, there was always a fear that the situation could end up with a casualty.
Let's start, though, with that good news. The cost of rural crime has fallen. New figures from the insurers NFU Mutual show a 16.5% fall last year. The costs are put at £44 million in comparison with £53 million the year before. The biggest fall is in the theft of agricultural vehicles, and the number of animals killed or injured in dog attacks was also down by a quarter. But livestock theft remained high. We have sadly talked a lot about rural crime on this programme, from rustling to fly tipping and the damage caused by hare coursers. This is Chris Corbett, a farmer in Warwickshire, speaking earlier this year.
We're getting regular visits of an evening through the night, and they'll drive around fields, they'll smash gates off, they'll go through hedges, and they have a complete disregard for the damage they're doing and the people in the area. And if we go near them, confront them, we get threatened, we get verbally abused. I mean, they'll even sort of try to hit us in vehicles. It's frustrating because the damage they do and the mess they make and the crop damage is quite considerable in places.
Chris Corbett there in Warwickshire. Hannah Binns is NFU Mutual's Rural Affairs Specialist.
It's really encouraging to see that there has been a fall in rural crime across the UK. But just because there has been a fall doesn't mean that crime isn't happening anymore. We know that thieves are becoming more organised, determined and persistent in their nature.
There does seem to be a fall, though, in the theft of things like agricultural vehicles, GPS equipment, that kind of thing. But not such a fall in things like livestock theft. Why is that so difficult to tackle?
Livestock theft is incredibly difficult to tackle given the isolated nature of farms. These farms are happening in the fields in the middle of nowhere. There's not often people around to see what's happening, compared to farmyards. And this is a huge worry. So that's why NFU Mutual is proud to fund the first UK's livestock theft prevention officer, which sits part of the National Rural Crime Unit.
What sort of thing can that person advise farmers to do? What makes a difference?
Yeah, there isn't one silver solution to, rural crime and livestock theft. We'd urge farmers to keep stock records up to date, regularly check the sheep, alter different times that they're checking them, rather than just checking them at 10 o'clock every single day, maybe vary that. If possible, keep them away from roadside fields. I know that can be quite hard, especially in remote areas. There's a whole host of things that farmers can do.
One figure really stood out to me, and that's a quite significant fall in the number of animals either severely injured or killed in dog attacks last year.
Yeah, so it's encouraging to see that the cost of dog attacks has fallen, thanks to industries campaigning on that issue. But one attack is still too many. We're still hearing reports from farmers where dogs have chased, injured and killed livestock, left with some really horrific injuries. And it can be really emotionally distressing for farmers to witness that.
Hannah Binns there from NFU Mutual. All this week we are going to be talking about seaweed. Now, I can't pretend that is a new thing. It's been used across the British Isles for centuries, both as a food and as a natural fertiliser. More recently, though, its uses are being stretched. And today we're going to talk about seaweed as a biostimulant. That's a class of products which encourage plant growth and the uptake of nutrients in the soil. At the Holkham estate in North Norfolk, a trial funded by the WWF and the Co-op Foundation has been trying to prove that the use of seaweed-based biostimulant can reduce the need for artificial nitrogen fertiliser without affecting yields. Well, if it's successful, it could be a way for farmers to reduce costs and minimise the negative side effects of overusing fertiliser. Our reporter Theo White went to find out more and started by speaking to Dominic Swan from Catalyst Farming, who's helping to run the trial.
We're in a massive field of barley. There's the rattle of these plastic flags which are demarcating, I think, the trial.
Yeah, so there's a range of fertilisers, and then there's also with and without seaweed biostimulants.
When do you think you'll have kind of concrete results on that?
After harvest.
My name is Scotbeef. I'm the Managing Director of Centre Pharma Biotechnica.
How do you make your biostimulant?
We effectively use a harvested and dried seaweed, which we then extract with hot water to make a sort of a tea, and that tea is then concentrated to a syrup. And that syrup is what we supply to the farmers which they then dilute into irrigation water and apply as a foliar application.
I'm Lucy Lee, Chief Advisor for Conservation Programmes at WWF UK. We're really excited about the potential for seaweed because it's a crop you can grow in the ocean, doesn't need fertiliser, it can help to support coastal biodiversity, absorb excess nutrients in coastal waters, but then you've got the real potential for that seaweed to be reduced to support terrestrial agriculture.
I'm leaving Holkham now for Blakeney Harbour, a few miles down the coast, where I'm meeting Willie Athill and Ali Wharf, who run Norfolk Seaweed. I want to find out how they tie into this project and how the seaweed farming actually works. So we've just stepped aboard a lovely little boat.
Yeah, we use this for running around in the harbour and going out to our slightly bigger boat, which is the seaweed boat, which I'll show you in a minute.
Ali, how did you get involved then as a company with this trial?
We're obviously the natural fit as the local seaweed farm to Holkham, but it's also very much about the vision of a circular economy, of being able to grow the seaweed here, process it relatively nearby and put it on the land at Holkham.
You're setting up a seaweed farm 2.5 miles out. That's obviously in the North Sea. It's a place where fisheries boom. Has that been a challenge?
With the seaweed farm, there's a lot of research, academic research, which says a seaweed farm creates a habitat for lobsters, for crabs, that increased biodiversity, I hope will be proved to be properly beneficial. And then the fishing industry also will see that it's not a threat, it's a benefit.
So we've just come out from the kind of natural harbour. It's immediately a lot rougher, isn't it?
I'm not going to take you out further because it's going to be too rough.
The farm is out there. What would you describe it?
Out there, it's hardly noticeable. You've got 4 navigation buoys, one at each corner of the farm, and the farm's 500 metres by 500 metres.
Do you plant the seaweed? Do you use a seed? I mean, how does seaweed farming work?
We plant the seaweed on a rope in the lab. We put our grow lines, which are already out there at sea, we've already set them out there, and the twine covered in the little baby seaweed seedlings unravels helically around the grow line.
We're just coming up to your seaweed boat, the one you would take out to the farm further offshore. That's not what I would think of as a big farming vessel that could take a lot of seaweed back with it.
No, it's not. It's very much like farming. You've got to have a really good tractor, you've got to have a really good harvester. So we've got to design, us and the sort of nascent seaweed industry is in the process of designing the kit. And this winter we got hammered by storms because we're designing what we're trying to do, and there's going to be mistakes. It's not for the faint-hearted, this business.
That report from Theo White. A Scottish abattoir has closed with the loss of 90 jobs. Scotbeef at Inverurie has been shut as the company says an operational review concluded it was necessary to protect the long-term future of the business amid what it describes as industry challenges. Earlier this year, the number of cattle in Scotland fell to its lowest level for a decade, and farming groups called for government support to rebuild the national herd, warning that some abattoirs might close because they become uneconomic. Andrew Connon is president of the National Farmers Union Scotland.
Well, it's hugely disappointing to hear that Scotbeef Inverurie has closed, and I think it's just a sign of the times, actually. It's purely down to supply and demand. We've seen record prices for beef cattle, especially in the last 6 to 8 months, due to a shortage of throughput. And bearing in mind that the Scottish abattoir sector is running with 74% capacity, there was always a fear that the situation could end up with a casualty.
So it's just simply that there aren't enough animals coming through?
The lack of throughput means that the abattoirs are under pressure, and obviously it's driven the price up. There's a shortage of finished cattle in Scotland and the UK as well. So I think prices has put a lot of pressure onto the supply chain. It's been hard on Scotbeef like others, and sadly Scotbeef have decided to close the door in Inverurie.
What will that mean for farmers who use that abattoir? Where's the next one?
People will readjust. The fact that there is capacity throughout Scotland. There are 2 large abattoirs, Woodheads at Turriff in Aberdeenshire, and there's Keepack at Portlethen, just south of Aberdeen. The next large one is ABP at Perth. So there's still other facilities there, but those farmers have been loyal to Scotbeef in Inverurie for decades, now have to readjust and find another outlet for the cattle.
Why is there overcapacity in Scottish abattoirs?
Well, the overcapacity really is just due to a lack of cattle numbers. In the NFU Scotland, we've been lobbying for years at Scottish Government and the fact that we need to maintain a critical mass. And that critical mass means having enough livestock to actually fulfil the demands of the supply chain. And for several years now, we've highlighted the fact that unless we have that critical mass, there will be casualties.
But isn't that up to farmers? If farmers were producing enough cattle, enough sheep, we wouldn't be in this situation.
It's absolutely down to farmers, but the key thing has been for many years now, there's two things. Prices have been unsustainable, for beef production, and also lack of confidence from government, and plenty of shout from governments and climate change committees about the need to reduce livestock numbers. So for the last 10, 15 years, there's been enough confidence there. Also, succession's an issue in farming and getting enough labour onto farms, especially livestock farms. So if you take all that into account, here we are today with reduced cattle numbers and sheep numbers, to be fair, and excess abattoir capacity.
And in fact, given all the pressures that you talk about, isn't that what will happen over the next few years?
I would certainly hope not. I mean, we're still a growing global population, and even the UK population. People need to be fed, and there's a rise in demand for red meat. And there's a marketplace there for it. So, Scottish beef and British meat as well, getting some of the best standards in the world.
Andrew Conlon from the National Farmers Union Scotland. That's it from us. I'm Charlotte Smith. The producer is Rebecca Rooney, and Farming Today is a BBC Audio Bristol production.